Hey everybody, I'm Deborah Richmond. I want to talk today about a particular type of quilting called Big Stitch Quilting. Now, we're going to talk about the quilt behind me. When it came time for me to quilt this quilt, I've done a lot of hand quilting, traditional hand quilting, where you're using regular quilting thread or regular cotton thread or polyester thread, silk thread, but it's typically thread. This is something different. Big Stitch Quilting is something where you're using a larger thread with larger stitches. I want to show you this up close, so let's take a look at the actual quilting on this quilt up close. Okay, so taking a closer look at this quilt, what you're going to see is the big stitches that we've put in are put in with circles. I decided to go with a real contemporary look, and I just made large spiral circles with the quilting. And so you can see that from a distance you don't see it quite so much, but as you move closer you can see those stitches. Now these stitches are much larger than typical traditional hand quilting, and again, this is because we are using pearl cotton and embroidery floss. I have used both on this quilt. And they both work very well. This makes a really nice overall design that shows really well because those stitches are big and because I used usually a contrasting color. That's exactly the effect I wanted. I wanted you to be able to really see those stitches. So let's show you how to do this. Okay, so let me show you how we get started. What I have put together here is simply a rectangle of fabric. I've made a test piece, which is a quilt sandwich. So basically it's a top, it's batting in the middle, and it's a fabric on the back. And then I have used the basting gun, Quilt Tack basting gun, to tack the pieces together, and I'm going to show you that a little bit later. I also will make these these small test pieces anytime I'm trying something new. So I highly recommend, if you want to give this a try and you've never done it before, use it, put yourself together a test piece just like this. So for the spirals that are on the quilt, what I did was I used a hoop. Now whenever I'm hand quilting, I always use these wooden hoops. It's my favorite. I've used different frames before, but the hoops are just really versatile to me. I can sit and take them anywhere, sitting on the couch watching television with my family. They're very portable. So that's what I use for hand quilting. I can use it for traditional quilting and also for the Big Stitch. I am using this hoop as also a template for my pattern. So what I'm doing is I'm starting out and I am going to be stitching all the way around the outer edge of this hoop, and I'm going to keep spiraling in as I go, as I quilt, until I get to the middle. And so wherever you place the hoop, that's where your next spiral pattern is going to land. So to do this hand stitching, I'm going to be using a very large needle with embroidery floss. Now the reason I use a large needle is because I need it, number one, I need a needle that's very sturdy because I'll be pulling on this a little bit harder than I would regular thread. I also need a needle that has a large eye because I need to be able to thread this easily. And I'm using pearl cotton, which is thick, and also I can use the 6-strand embroidery floss, which is thick. So that large eye is really important. Now when you are doing any kind of hand quilting, the motion that you're going to use is a rocking motion. The basic idea for hand quilting is you're simply going up and down the stitches. It's like a dotted line, straight up and down stitches. You'll pick up several stitches at a time. So I'm going to put my needle straight down next to where the thread has come up last. And I'm going to hold my hand underneath the stitch so that when I come straight down, I'm touching my finger underneath it. And that's going to be my guide. Once I touch my finger underneath it, I'm going to just push it back up, and the needle's going to come up. I'll go down, touch my finger, push it back up. So it looks like this. I'm going to go down, touch my finger, and I'm going to now push from the bottom and move my needle back up, down, up, down where I touch my finger, and up. So you see, this is the rocking motion that people are talking about. I've done 3 stitches on here, and I'm going to pull that through. And so these are the 3 stitches that I just put in. So one thing to know about Big Stitches, your stitches don't have to be really even. They don't have to be all the same size. They don't even have to be all that straight. One of the beautiful things about the Big Stitch that I like is that it's really kind of a carefree stitch. You don't have to sweat this one. You don't have to worry how many stitches per inch. Big is fine. In fact, Big Stitch will often give you a bit more of a primitive look, and so uneven stitches are absolutely fine. When you first start quilting, your stitches will look a certain way. The more you quilt, the better you get at it. I've quilted lots and lots of quilts, and so you just get better as you go. Give yourself permission when you start learning how to quilt, hand quilt, to do a job badly, frankly. I let myself do a couple of them. I just know they're going to not be that great, but as you get practice, it gets better. Big Stitch is very forgiving, so it's a great place to start. So I'm going to show it again. You move down, push up, down, push up, down, push up. I have a nice strong needle. I'm going to pull that through, and my stitches are here. Let's talk about thimbles. My favorite thimble is a very thick leather thimble. Now there's lots of different kinds of thimbles. I'm just going to show you what I use. This is the type that I've started with. I've had the most success. This thimble looks really nasty. I've used it and used it. You know, it's got a lot of poke marks, but that's a good thimble. The leather thimbles, I have used them so much that they will eventually wear out, and then you just get another thimble. They're not expensive, so I can do 2 or 3 quilts before I need another thimble. But this thimble is, you pick a size that fits onto your middle finger. That's very typically using it on your finger or on your thumb. I'm going to show you first on your finger. So you're going to put it on the hand that's pushing the needle. That's what you're going to need that force for. And so now I'm going to, same motion that I showed before, I'm going to push the needle down and up. It's exactly the same as I showed before. Push it through, and you pull on that. Now again, this is just to protect that finger as you push this needle so that you don't accidentally ever push the needle through your skin. If you've ever done that, you'll never do it again. Straight down, my finger is underneath, I'm pushing it up, rock it down, push it up, rock it down, push it up. And so you'll see, this is kind of, as you get going, I start to use my thumb sometimes to guide it. I push it down. Sometimes I'll use my thumb here just to feel when that point comes up so that I know it's there. I can push it back down. It kind of just helps guide it. So that's something to play with. You can use that extra motion, whatever you're comfortable with. There's no right or wrong way to do this. I'm going to show you the ways I do it because this is what works for me. But if you're more comfortable with some other type of method or only parts of these methods, that's absolutely fine, whatever works for you. So let me show you now the different types of threads that I'm using. This is just your typical floss that is 6 strands. Depending on my needle, I can use all 6 strands, or if my eye of my needle isn't as big as I'd like it to be, I can cut down to maybe 4 strands of thread. So I can separate them, so taking 1 or 2 of them out to make it more manageable. You still get a nice stitch, you still get lots of good color coming through, embroidery floss is very practical, and you can get lots of different colors. This is pearl cotton, and mine has come undone. Usually it comes in a nice pretty strand that looks more like this. I'll twist it up and pretty. Is how you usually will buy this. And there's different thicknesses of pearl cotton. Now, I have tried a couple of different thicknesses. The type that you're going to typically find in your fabric stores, there's a couple different sizes, both will work. Try some sizes out, test them. See if they will go through your needle as far as threading your needle, and if they do, yes, that's going to work. And then try it out on a test piece and see. I have found that the larger size pearl cotton works just as well as some of the thinner ones. So you really have a lot of choices as far as what types of thread you use. Now, with Big Stitch, it's really nice to use a contrasting color. So that's why I'm showing you this with this dark purple on this particular piece, is because that contrast gives you lots of interest, and that's what you're going for when you are doing Big Stitch. Now let me show you just another little trick with your thread, with your thimble. And that is, as you get good at this, do it for a while. If you're just starting out and you're learning how to use a thimble, do it one way for a while. But then what's nice about the hoops is that you can go in different directions. So right now I'm showing you how I am quilting towards myself. And so the needle is coming back at me and I'm using my index finger, my middle finger to push. Let's say I've moved around the hoop, I've been sewing, and I get to here. Now I want to be able to either turn the hoop around or to be able to now stitch in a different direction, which is away from myself. And I can do that. And the way that I do that is I will put my thimble on my other finger. And so I will just simply take it and I'm going to put it on my thumb. Now I'm going to use this meat of my thumb here with the thimble to push. What's really fun is that after you've done this for so many hours like I have, you can actually learn very quickly how to move that thimble to your thumb without having to take your other hand off the quilt, which is, it's just from a matter of doing this a lot, you learn how to do that. It's not something that probably you'll do right away, but just take it off, put it on your thumb. Now we're going to be quilting away. So I am going to go down just like I've done before, rock up, down, touch my finger, rock up, down, touch my finger, rock up. I like to do 3 stitches and then go again. Now you can see that I am going to be heading, as I come around this pattern, I'm going to head, not so I meet at the end of it, but I'm going to go ahead and then keep doing this spiral. So I'm starting to move my thread this direction so that it will hit over here as it continues the spiral. Now let me show you, let's just get some stitches in here, and I'm going to show you how to end this thread. I never use knots when I am hand stitching, whether it is with hand quilting, whether it's with regular thread or whether I'm using any of these different flosses. And that is because I learned long ago that if you put knots in your thread when you start or stop, eventually those knots are going to pull through and they're going to be on top of your quilt. I had one that showed me that I always used to use knots because I'm like, oh, I want to be able to anchor it and I don't want it to come out, so I used knots. Well, it only took a couple times of washing that quilt where all the knots were on top and it didn't look as pretty anymore. So I learned that that's, I always learn things the hard way, it seems. I learned that the way to end a thread is not with a knot. Not with a knot. It is to work your thread into the rest of the quilt so that it's going to kind of weave in. Now there's a couple ways to do this. Very simply, you can put your needle in for that last stitch and simply veer your needle off here and pull it out, and then you can end your stitch there. Now that just means you're going to cut this off. Your thread tail is going to be down in here and it's not going to come out. I've done enough quilting to know that that really does not come out. But if you want something more secure, let me thread this again and I'll show you another way to do it. If you're worried about that tail coming out, you can take your needle and you're going to weave back in through these stitches. So I'm going to take my needle, and what I'm doing is my needle is over here. I'm going to turn it and push it here. It's still within the layers of the sandwich. So now my needle has gone here, and then I pushed it through this stitch over here, and if I'm lucky I can kind of bend that just a little bit more in here. So as I pull this out, what I've done is this last stitch, now the thread is back on itself and it is woven like a serpentine through these last few stitches. So that's something that you give it a try. That works very well. Now when I go ahead and cut this thread off, it's not going to go anywhere. I like to use about this length of thread in my needle. Anything too long will tangle quite a bit as you're quilting, so you kind of learn what length it is that you like to use. So as I thread my needle, just like when you're doing any kind of hand sewing, I'm going to thread it, bring the excess down here so that it shortens it up for me, and then here's the end that's going to be in my quilt as I begin the stitches again. To begin again, I want to start right where I left off. I'm going to go ahead and start back here. You can do the same thing with weaving your tail in through here if you like, but I usually don't. I usually just give it a good inch or as much as I can go with this long needle. Pull it right up where you want. See, here's that little bit of tangling. Okay, here we go. Okay, so you see the thread, the end is there. You can actually leave a little bit here just so you know that this is your thread is there and it's secure. And then you can go ahead. I take one back stitch, meaning I move my needle to behind this stitch where I'm at right now, down and up. And I don't pull real hard, just a little bit. So I've left a tail, one back stitch that'll keep it secure enough for me to get started. And now I'm ready to quilt again. Okay. So just like before, I'm going to go down. I'm trying to do this without putting my fingers in your way so you can see. Down, up, down, up. And like I said, you can get where, pull my thread out a little bit, you can get where you can do this really, it's kind of a really relaxing thing to do, whether you're riding in a car, you know, listening to music, watching a movie. I do watch a lot of movies as I quilt. When you get a little bit of tangle, just pull it back out a little bit to untangle it a little, and now it's back through. You'll get a feel for keeping the thread untangled, but it does tangle from time to time. Just know that that is going to happen. Okay, so that is the stitches itself. I'm going to keep going all the way around till I'm in the middle. I'm going to end my thread. I'm going to move my hoop to another part of the quilt and start again. Now let me just show you a little bit about how to move this around your quilt, and I'm going to show you with a pad of paper. So let's say that this is your quilt and you're ready to quilt, and you're going to get started. First of all, when I start hand quilting a quilt, I like to start in the middle. You've gone ahead and you've basted your quilt together, and it's going to hold together pretty well, but I do like to start in the middle just so that as I quilt, I kind of quilt and move out as I move my hoop around and add my designs from the middle out. It's just a good rule of thumb. If you start in a corner and you keep quilting maybe this direction, what could happen is that maybe it's going to shift your material and keep pushing it, so maybe it comes distorts a little bit as far as the backing and the batting and the top. So it's just nice to start right in the middle. So let's say we're going to start in the middle. I'm going to put my hoop down. So let's say here's my hoop, and as I start to stitch, so you can see this is going to be my hoop. As I start to stitch, I'm going to go ahead, keep stitching until I get this nice spiral. That's exactly the way I've done the quilt behind me until I finish right here at the end. I'm now going to move my hoop, take it off the quilt, and let's say I'm going to move it here. So let's say here's my hoop again, the first row of stitches around the outside of the hoop, and then I'm going to keep quilting, and I'm going to move in. And let's say next I'm going to go here, and this is where the next one is going to be, so that you get the idea. Now what starts to happen is then you will have these gaps in between where the hoops have landed. And that's okay. I'm going to show you how you fill those in. So let's do one more here. Let's say this is where the hoop lands here. Now I've got all this room here in the middle. What I can do is I can now move my hoop over here, and I can just start filling in these lines. I can keep taking it around. I'm going to need to keep kind of moving my hoop as I go, but then when I get to where I meet a line, I can stop right there and where the lines touch. I can then take a look at the pattern. If the spiral were to keep going, it would come out about here. And so I can now move my hoop and stitch here so that it looks like it has kept going. And then here I can keep going here. But so you can see, you can do this, continue that pattern until you hit some more lines. And in that way, this is how you're going to now complete this particular pattern, so that you can keep filling up everything. You want the whole quilt to be covered with stitches, and that there not be any areas where you're missing any stitches. When you get to an edge, you can go ahead and put your hoop right onto the fabric, and let's say this is where your hoop landed. It's half on the fabric and half off. Go ahead and use that for the guide, and then just come back through and pick up and put some of these in. It's going to look like that went right off the edge, but all you're doing is, of course, stitching right to this edge with some of these partial circles. And so again, now you can see here, I can fill this up, stopping there, starting here. Here's this little section. I can fill it up here, this way. Let's say I have another spiral here, so I could keep this going. It's really very forgiving. There's not a right or wrong. As you put these designs on here, practice on a piece of paper first. I often like to do that just to get a hang of where everything's going, how it's looking. But once I've done something by hand on a piece of paper, then when I go and I'm thinking about putting it right onto the quilt and getting started stitching, I have a better idea of where I want all these things to go. Don't be worried if any of these don't look perfect geometrically, because when you get them on the quilt, if you look at the quilt behind me, you won't see the spirals so blatantly as you would on the piece of paper. They're going to sink in. They're going to go into the pattern where your eye will be drawn from circle to circle, but nobody's going to be inspecting what did you do between the two. So if there's any areas you don't like that much, don't worry about it. Don't fret it. Keep moving and cover your whole quilt with stitches. Now what I want to show you is how to make this practice piece, because as you get started, I do highly recommend you go ahead and use a practice piece like this. So let me just show you how I do that. Now you may have seen me do this in another video where I used the Quilt Tack basting tool. I absolutely love this tool. It's how I baste my quilts together. This is showing you on a very small piece, but the same thing can happen on a full quilt, and this is exactly how I do it. Now this is one I'm putting together. I've got some lines drawn on there because I'm going to be using this for another project. I'm going to be practicing some machine quilting on this one. So I thought I'd use it to show you how it goes together. You're going to start with a small piece of scrap fabric that you're going to lay down as your bottom piece or top piece. This is making the quilt sandwich, as we call it. Take some extra batting. If you have some extra pieces from other quilts you've done, this is a great way to use up those extra pieces, is to use them for these practice pieces. So you're going to lay your batting down, and then you're going to lay your other piece of your sandwich. I don't know if it's the top or bottom yet. I guess for me this will be the bottom. Doesn't really matter for this one. So I'm going to go ahead and now I'm going to baste. So you did see on this particular piece, you've seen some of these small red tags. And what these are small pieces of plastic, just like the tags that are when you buy clothes at the store, and the tags that are connected to your piece of clothing with a plastic tie. And that's what this does. This is the Quilt Tack basting gun, my absolute favorite. I'm going to put the piece together. When I'm basting, no matter whether I'm using this or if I'm using safety pins, I want to be able to baste so that there's always something tacking it along the quilt, so there's never a space larger than my hand that's not covered. That's kind of just how you can do the rule of thumb. I'm going to go ahead, put my hand underneath all layers of this quilt sandwich, and I'm going to push this very sharp point that is on the Quilt Tack gun. I'm going to push this through the fabric, and I'm going to then pull the trigger. And it's put that tag right there in between. The tag goes from top to bottom, so you can see it here on the other side of the quilt, and it's going to hold that together. So I'm just going to kind of eye it as far as, let's put another one here. Let's put another one here. Okay, and I'm just going to keep going. I'm going to keep shooting it from here, 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 all the way through till I have this all marked. When I'm doing a large quilt, I will start at a corner, and since the quilt is large, I'm going to put the tacks in, I'm going to roll it, put some more tacks in, and I'm going to keep rolling it. That's how I do a whole quilt using the Quilt Tack gun. But once you have all the pieces in place, now you have your practice piece ready to go and ready to go ahead and put your hoop on. Now you can use several different sizes of hoops. I have this size. I have one that is a little bit smaller that I like to use. There are some that are really small. You can use those, but for a quilt top I don't recommend it. I recommend the larger sizes. When I'm sitting with this, I will sit with it on my lap. So if I'm sitting on the couch, it's right here with my lap, just like this. Sometimes I will tip it to one side if I'm working on it. Since I'm right-handed, I'm always going to have it on my left side. You can put pillows underneath it to prop it up a little bit. Just whatever gives you that angle that works really well for you in order to be able to keep quilting. And now this brings up another good point. I've got my thread caught around this little tag. As you're quilting, those little tags that you've put on there for basting, as you come up to them, you simply pull them up, cut them off, and discard them. And the piece on the back, you could just discard that too. So that as you're quilting, you come up to them, go ahead and just clip them and keep them out of your way. They've done their job. Now that you've got the stitching started, that's what now will hold the quilt together. So again, this is Big Stitch Quilting, hand quilting with Big Stitch. It goes very quickly as far as it's faster than when I hand quilt with regular thread. It's just as satisfying. I love how easy it is to do. I love how forgiving it is. It's a great way, if you've not hand quilted before, to start. And if you have hand quilted before, try this out because it's a nice way to finish a quilt much faster than traditional hand quilting. Thanks for joining me. And be sure to subscribe to our channel. You can do so here by clicking the subscribe button. That way you'll find out about new videos as they become available. It's what I use in order to hand quilt, and I use it for